Broadway is a place of bright lights and big dreams, but at the New Amsterdam Theatre, some of those dreams never truly left the stage. This theatre is one of the oldest and most beautiful buildings in New York City. It was built way back in 1903. While many people come here today to see Disney musicals, there is one resident who doesn't need a ticket to get in. Her name is Olive Thomas, and she is the most famous ghost in all of Broadway history. To understand Olive's story, we have to go back to the early 1900s. Back then, the theatre was home to the Ziegfeld Follies. These were massive, fancy shows with beautiful costumes and incredible music. Olive Thomas was the star of the show. She was known as the most beautiful woman in New York. People loved her, and she loved the spotlight. But in 1920, her life came to a tragic and mysterious end. While on vacation in Paris with her husband, she accidentally drank a medicine that was actually poison. It was a huge shock to the world, and her fans were heartbroken. However, it didn't take long for theatre workers to realize that Olive wasn't really gone. Not long after her death, a night watchman was doing his rounds in the empty theatre. He saw a woman in a green shimmering dress covered in beads. She was wearing a headpiece with a sash and carrying a blue glass bottle, the same kind of bottle that held the poison that took her life. When he called out to her, she didn't say a word. She just smiled, blew him a kiss, and walked right through a solid wall. Since then, Olive has been spotted dozens of times. She isn't a scary or mean ghost. Most people describe her as mischievous or even flirty. She mostly appears to men. Security guards have reported seeing her backstage or on the stage itself. She often looks like she is just about to perform. Some say they have seen her standing in the wings, waiting for her cue. Others have heard the sound of clicking high heels on the wooden stage when the theatre is completely empty. Olive seems to love the attention, but she also expects respect. There is a very important tradition at the New Amsterdam. Every night, when the staff is leaving and the ghost light, a single bulb left on the stage, is lit, they have to say, "Good night, Olive." There are 2 large portraits of her near the stage door. If people forget to say hello or goodbye to her, things start to go wrong. Lights might flicker for no reason, or props might disappear right before a show starts. One famous story involves a construction worker who was helping to renovate the theatre in the 1990s. He didn't believe in ghosts and made fun of the legend of Olive Thomas. Later that day, he claimed that an invisible force pushed him while he was on a ladder. He was so spooked that he refused to come back to work. Whether she is playing tricks or just looking for a friend, Olive Thomas remains the true queen of the New Amsterdam. If you walk down West 44th Street, you'll see the Belasco Theatre. It looks like a normal classic theatre from the outside, but inside it holds some of the spookiest secrets in the city. This theatre was built by a man named David Belasco in 1907. David was a very strange and interesting person. He was so dedicated to the theatre that he actually lived there. He had a secret, multi-story penthouse built right above the stage. He even dressed like a priest, wearing a black suit and a white collar, which earned him the nickname the Bishop of Broadway. David Belasco died in 1931, but many people believe he never actually moved out of his apartment. In fact, he is still seen quite often. Most of the time, he is spotted sitting in his favorite seat in the balcony, watching rehearsals. He wears his signature black suit and white collar, looking down at the actors with a serious expression. Sometimes, actors on stage will look up and see a dark figure leaning over the railing. When they go up to check, the seat is empty. But David isn't the only ghost at the Belasco. There is also the legend of the Blue Lady. According to the stories, she was a woman who worked at the theatre or perhaps lived nearby. One night, many years ago, she stepped into the elevator shaft, thinking the elevator was there. Sadly, it wasn't, and she fell to her death. Now her ghost is seen wandering the hallways and the aisles of the theatre. People say she wears a long flowing blue dress that seems to glow in the dark. Unlike David Belasco, who is usually quiet, the Blue Lady is known for making noise. Staff members have reported hearing the sound of an old-fashioned elevator moving up and down the shaft, even though the modern elevator is sitting still. Others have felt a sudden, freezing cold breeze pass by them in a room with no windows. One of the most common reports is the sound of a woman crying softly in the back of the house during a performance. The theatre is also full of strange technical glitches that people blame on the bishop. Lights will turn on and off by themselves, and sometimes the heavy stage curtains will move as if someone is walking behind them, even when no one is there. One actor once reported that while he was struggling to remember his lines during a rehearsal, he felt a firm hand on his shoulder and heard a man's voice whisper the correct line in his ear. When he turned around, the stage was empty. David Belasco was famous for being a perfectionist. He wanted every show to be perfect. Many people think he stays behind to make sure the actors are doing a good job. Even though it might be scary to see a ghostly priest in the balcony, the people who work at the Belasco usually feel like he is watching over them. They treat him like a permanent member of the crew. But still, you probably wouldn't want to be caught in that theatre alone after midnight. If you ever hear an actor say they want to play the palace, they are talking about the ultimate dream. Located right in the heart of Times Square, the Palace Theatre was once the most important stage in the world for vaudeville. Vaudeville was a type of show from a long time ago that had everything: singers, dancers, magicians, and even circus performers. But because so many people performed there over the last 100 years, many people believe that some of them never really left. In fact, some ghost hunters say the palace has more than 100 ghosts living inside its walls. The most famous and truly scary story at the palace involves a man named Louis Borsellino. Louis was part of a famous family of acrobats called the Four Casting Borsellinos. Back in the 1930s, they performed high-flying stunts without any safety nets. One night, during a particularly difficult move high above the stage, Louis lost his grip. He fell all the way down to the stage floor while the audience watched in horror. He didn't survive the fall, and many people believe his spirit is stuck in the moment of that accident. Performers and stagehands at the palace have reported seeing a strange, white light high up in the rafters where the acrobats used to hang. Sometimes they see a figure dressed in old-fashioned circus tights poised to jump. The most chilling part? Some people claim they have heard a ghostly scream that gets louder and louder as if someone is falling, only for it to cut off right before anything hits the ground. It is enough to make even the bravest actor feel a chill down their spine. But Louis isn't the only one hanging around. There is also the legend of the little girl in the balcony. Many ushers, the people who help you find your seat, have reported seeing a young girl in a white dress sitting all by herself in the mezzanine during rehearsals. She usually looks like she is playing with something in her lap. When an usher goes over to ask where her parents are, she simply vanishes into thin air. Some say they have even seen a small red ball roll across the stage on its own, as if the girl is trying to get the actors to play with her. Another mysterious spirit is known as the White Lady cello player. In the old days, theatres had live orchestras that sat in a pit right in front of the stage. Musicians have reported seeing a woman in a long white gown sitting in the pit, holding a cello. She looks perfectly real until you notice that she doesn't make any sound when she moves her bow across the strings. If you try to talk to her, she slowly fades away like mist. The palace is so haunted that some people believe even the famous Judy Garland, the actress who played Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, still visits. She performed at the palace many times and loved it more than almost anywhere else. Staff members have said they sometimes smell her favorite perfume, or hear a faint, beautiful voice singing "Over the Rainbow" coming from the empty dressing rooms. With over 100 spirits rumored to be inside, the Palace Theatre is like a giant, fancy apartment building for ghosts. Whether they are looking for one last round of applause or just wandering the halls they loved so much, the ghosts of the palace make sure that the show never truly ends. For any storyteller, the palace is a goldmine of creepy tales and mysterious sightings that prove Broadway is just as magical and spooky as people say. When you think of a theatre for kids, you probably think of bright colours, laughter, and fun shows. The new Victory Theatre on 42nd Street is exactly that. but it also has a very long and sometimes dark history. Built in 1900 by Oscar Hammerstein I, a very famous theatre man, it is the oldest theatre on its block. Over the years, it has been an opera house, a movie theatre, and even a place that wasn't very kid-friendly at all. Because it has changed so much, it seems to have collected a few extra residents who aren't on the payroll. The most common ghost story at the New Victory involves a mischievous child. Since the theatre is now a place for families, it almost makes sense that a young spirit would want to stay there. This ghost is often described as a girl about 7 or 8 years old, wearing a Victorian-style dress with lace. She doesn't seem to want to hurt anyone, but she definitely likes to play. Ushers, who are cleaning up after a show, often hear the sound of small footsteps running through the aisles behind them. When they turn around, the theatre is empty. The girl is also known for moving things. Actors have gone to the wings to grab a prop they just put down, only to find it has been moved to the other side of the stage. Sometimes, the heavy velvet curtains will start to wiggle and shake as if someone is hiding behind them and playing hide-and-seek. One night, a security guard saw a small hand reaching out from behind a curtain. When he pulled the curtain back, there was nobody there, but he felt a cold breeze rush past his legs, as if someone had just run by him. Another ghost at the New Victory is a much more serious figure. He is often called the man in the grey suit. Unlike the playful little girl, this man is usually seen standing at the very back of the theatre, near the sound booth. He looks like a gentleman from the early 1900s, with a tall hat and a long coat. He doesn't move or speak, he just watches the stage with a very stern look on his face. Some people think he might be one of the original managers of the theatre, still making sure that everything is running perfectly. The basement of the New Victory is perhaps the creepiest part of the building. It's an old space with stone walls and narrow hallways. Staff members have reported that the temperature in the basement can drop sharply in a single second. They also talk about phantom smells. Sometimes the basement will suddenly smell like expensive cigar smoke or old-fashioned perfume, even though nobody is smoking and the building is supposed to be empty. One of the strangest things that happens at the New Victory is the sound of phantom applause. Late at night, when the theatre is locked up and the lights are low, neighbours and night watchmen have reported hearing the sound of a huge crowd cheering and clapping coming from inside the auditorium. But when they open the doors to check, the room is pitch black and silent. It's as if the ghosts are putting on their own secret show every night once the humans have gone home. The New Victory Theatre proves that even a place built for joy and kids can have a spooky side. The ghosts there seem to enjoy the energy of the performances. So, if you ever go there to see a show and feel a tiny hand brush against your shoulder, or see a man in an old suit watching from the back, don't be too scared. They're just part of the long, mysterious history of the oldest stage on 42nd Street. When you think of New York City, you probably picture the massive, glowing neon sign of Radio City Music Hall. It is known as the showplace of the nation, and it is famous for the high-kicking Rockettes and huge holiday shows. But while thousands of people visit every year to see the bright lights, there is one person who seems to have never checked out. His name was Samuel Roxy Rothafel, and he was the man who brought the music hall to life. Today, many people believe he still roams the building, making sure every performance is perfect. Roxy was a legendary showman. He didn't just want to build a theatre, he wanted to build a palace for the people. He was involved in every single detail, from the size of the stage to the colour of the carpets. He even had a secret, luxurious apartment built inside the music hall so he could always be close to the action. It had gold-leaf ceilings, wood-panelled walls, and a private shower. Roxy died in 1936, but his love for the theatre was so strong that many say his spirit stayed behind to keep an eye on things. The most common sightings of Roxy happen in his old private apartment. Even though the room is now used for special guests and meetings, staff members say they often feel a presence when they are inside. Sometimes the heavy, soundproof doors will open and close on their own. Security staff doing their rounds have reported seeing a man dressed in a very expensive, old-fashioned suit walking down the hallway toward the apartment. When they follow him to see who he is, he disappears right before he reaches the door. One of the spookiest stories involves the opening night of new shows. Roxy was famous for always being in the audience on opening night, cheering on his performers. To this day, ushers have reported seeing a distinguished-looking man sitting in one of the seats in the back of the theatre during the first performance of a new run. He always looks very happy, nodding along to the music. But when the lights go up for intermission, the seat is empty, and nobody saw the man leave. It seems Roxy just can't stay away from a good show. But Roxy isn't the only mystery at Radio City. Because the building is so huge, it takes up almost an entire city block. There are many dark corners and basement levels where strange things happen. Stagehands have reported hearing their names being called when they are working alone in the caves beneath the stage. These are the areas where the massive hydraulic elevators live. These elevators are so powerful they can lift an entire orchestra. They were even used by the military during World War II because they were top-secret technology. Some workers say they feel invisible hands touching their shoulders while they are servicing the machines. There is also a legend about a phantom rocket. While the Rockettes are famous for their perfect synchronization, some dancers have claimed that during rehearsals, they have seen an extra pair of legs in the line in the mirror. For a split second, there is a dancer dressed in a vintage costume from the 1930s, kicking right along with the rest of the team. Before anyone can point her out, she vanishes. It's as if one of the original dancers loved the stage so much, she decided to stay for an eternity of rehearsals. Even the restrooms at Radio City have a spooky reputation. Some guests have reported that the faucets will turn on and off by themselves, or that they will hear a woman's voice humming a show tune in an empty stall. Whether it's Roxy checking in on his apartment or a former dancer practicing her moves, Radio City Music Hall is a place where the history is just as loud as the music. The Lyceum Theatre on 45th Street is one of the most beautiful and historic buildings on Broadway. It was built in 1903, which makes it over 120 years old. It has tall columns on the outside and a very fancy interior with lots of gold and velvet. But the most interesting thing about the Lyceum isn't what's on the stage, it's what is hidden above it. High above the audience, there is a secret window that looks out from a private apartment. That apartment belonged to Daniel Frohman, the man who built the theatre, and many people think he is still looking through that window today. Daniel Frohman was a very successful theatre manager, but he was also a bit of a character. He loved his theatre so much that he lived in a penthouse right on top of it. He had a special window installed that allowed him to look directly down onto the stage from his dining room. This way, he could eat his dinner while watching the actors perform. He was known for being a very kind man, but he was also very strict about how his theatre was run. He died in 1940, but according to the people who work there, it looks like he never really moved out. One of the strangest things about the Lyceum is what happens in the bathrooms. It sounds funny, but it's actually quite creepy. For years, staff members and actors have reported that the automatic paper towel dispensers and faucets will go haywire. They will start spinning or running the moment someone mentions Daniel Frohman's name. It's almost like he's trying to join the conversation. One actress once joked about Daniel being a neat freak. And suddenly, every single paper towel dispenser in the room started spitting out towels at the same time. But the most famous ghost sighting at the Lyceum is the face in the window. Even though the penthouse is now used for the Schubert Archive, a place where they keep old theatre records, and isn't a home anymore, people still see things. Actors on stage have looked up toward the small dark window high in the wall and seen the silhouette of a man with a white beard looking down at them. Sometimes he is even seen waving a white handkerchief, which was Daniel's way of signaling to his wife, who was an actress, that she was doing a great job. The Lyceum also has a very famous ghost light. In the theatre world, a ghost light is a single light bulb left on a stand in the middle of the stage at night so nobody falls into the orchestra pit. At the Lyceum, workers have reported that the ghost light will sometimes move on its own. They will set it in the center of the stage, lock the doors, and come back the next morning to find it has been moved to the side, near the wings. Some think Daniel is just trying to clear the stage, so his ghostly actors have room to rehearse. There is also a story about a lady in green who is sometimes seen in the lobby. She wears a long, rustling silk dress and walks with a very straight posture. She is usually seen right before a show starts, blending in with the crowd of theatre-goers. However, when she walks toward the theatre doors, she doesn't hand over a ticket. She simply walks right through the closed wooden doors without opening them. People who have seen her say she smells like old roses and lavender, a scent that lingers in the air long after she has vanished. Working at the Lyceum can be a bit nerve-wracking if you don't like the feeling of being watched. Many stagehands say they feel like someone is standing right behind them while they are moving scenery, but when they turn around, there is nothing but shadows. But most people agree that Daniel Frohman is a good ghost. He loved the Lyceum more than anything in the world, and he seems happy to share it with the actors and audiences of today, as long as they remember to put on a good show. When most people think of a haunted house or a haunted theatre, they usually imagine an old, creaky building with peeling wallpaper and dusty curtains. But the Gershwin Theatre proves that you don't have to be old to be spooky. Built in 1972, the Gershwin is a massive, modern building. It is currently the home of the mega-hit musical Wicked, and thousands of fans flock there every week to see witches fly and dragons roar. However, some of the most interesting things happening at the Gershwin aren't part of the script. Because the theatre is so new, people were surprised when ghost stories started to pop up. Usually, ghosts are thought to be people who lived and died in a specific building. But at the Gershwin, some of the spirits seem to belong to the land itself, or perhaps they followed the theatre world into this new space. The most famous ghost at the Gershwin is known as the Man in the Blue Suit. He is often seen by actors and stagehands during rehearsals or late-night technical checks. He isn't dressed in modern clothes. Instead, he wears a sharp, bright blue suit that looks like it belongs in the late 1800s. He is most often spotted in the shadows at the very back of the seating area or standing quietly in the wings of the stage. Witnesses say he doesn't look like a scary monster. He looks like a real person. But when someone walks toward him to ask if he's lost, he simply disappears into the wall. One of the spookiest things about this man is that he never seems to look directly at anyone. He is always looking at the stage, as if he is waiting for a show to start that was cancelled 100 years ago. Some people believe that before the Gershwin was built, there were older buildings on this spot, and this man might be a spirit who refused to leave his home. Our research shows quite a history for this plot. It was the home of the Capitol Theatre, which closed its doors in 1968. Then construction started on an office block. Then it became the Paramount Plaza in 1980, after being purchased by the Paramount Group. Prior to being called the Gershwin Theatre, it was known as the Uris Theatre. So a lot of changes have taken place here. Another common occurrence at the Gershwin is known as the tapper. This isn't a ghost you see, but one you feel. Several actors, including some very famous ones, have reported the sensation of being tapped on the shoulder while they are standing alone in the wings waiting for their entrance. When they turn around, expecting to see a stage manager or a fellow actor, there is nobody there. Some performers have even felt their hair being lightly tugged or their costumes being pulled when they are in their dressing rooms. The Gershwin also has legendary cold spots. Even though the theatre has a very modern heating system, there are certain areas backstage that will suddenly become ice cold for no reason. Dogs, which are sometimes brought in by the actors, have been known to stop at these spots, growl at the empty air, and refuse to move forward. It's as if they can see something that human eyes just can't pick up. There is also a story about a phantom stagehand. Sometimes, when the crew is moving heavy pieces of scenery, they feel like the load suddenly gets lighter, as if someone invisible is helping them lift. Other times, tools that were left on a table will be found neatly organized on the floor a few minutes later. While this ghost seems helpful, it's still enough to give the workers a major case of the creeps when they are working the late shift. Whether it's the man in the blue suit or the helpful phantom in the wings, the Gershwin Theatre shows us that ghosts aren't just for the history books. They can be found in the newest, brightest places on Broadway. If we leave the bright lights of Times Square and head downtown to Greenwich Village, we find a very different kind of theatre. The Cherry Lane Theatre is tucked away on a beautiful winding street called Commerce Street. It is tiny compared to the Broadway giants, with only about 180 seats. It looks like a cozy little brick building, but it has a history that goes back way before it became a theatre in 1923. In fact, this building has been a brewery, a tobacco warehouse, and even a box factory. With so much history packed into such a small space, it's no wonder that the Cherry Lane is considered one of the most haunted spots in the village. The most famous ghost here is the Lady in White. She is a gentle, mysterious spirit who seems to love the building's peaceful atmosphere. People who have seen her describe her as a young woman in a long, flowing white dress that looks like it's made of silk. What makes the Lady in White so unique is that she usually announces her arrival with a smell. Many actors and audience members have reported a sudden, overwhelming scent of fresh lavender or roses filling the air. This happens even in the middle of winter when there are no flowers for miles. When you smell the lavender, you know the Lady in White is nearby. Legend says the Lady in White might have been a worker from the days when the building was a brewery. Others think she was an aspiring actress who spent all her time at the theatre but never got her big break. Whoever she was, she seems to be a protector of the space. One story tells of a small fire that started in the backstage area many years ago. A worker claimed he saw a woman in white pointing toward the smoke before she vanished. Because of her warning, the fire was put out before it could cause any real damage. But not all the spirits at the Cherry Lane are as calm as the Lady in White. There are also stories of the grumpy brewer. Because the building was once a place where beer was made, some believe one of the original owners still thinks he's in charge. This ghost is known for being a bit of a prankster. He likes to hide things, keys, scripts, and even shoes. Actors will leave their boots by their dressing room door, go inside for a second, and come back to find one boot gone. They usually find it hours later in a completely different part of the building, like the box office or the basement. The basement of the Cherry Lane is particularly spooky. It's a cramped space with low ceilings and old stone walls that still have the soul of the old factory. Staff members often report hearing the sound of heavy barrels being rolled across the floor above them when they know the theatre is empty. They also describe the feeling of being followed when they have to go down there to get supplies. Some have even seen dark shadows darting around the corners of their vision, only to find nothing there when they turn their heads. Despite these spooky stories, the people who work at the Cherry Lane love their ghosts. They feel like the spirits are part of the theatre's charm. The Lady in White and the Grumpy Brewer are just a few of the characters that make this tiny theatre so special. When you walk into the public theatre in the East Village, you aren't just walking into a theatre, you are walking into a massive piece of history. Long before it was a place for plays like Hamilton, this building was the Astor Library, one of the first big libraries in New York City. Built in the 1850s, it has huge red brick walls, towering columns, and long, echoing hallways. Because it used to be a library, it has a very different vibe than the theatres on Broadway. It feels older and a little bit more mysterious. The most famous spirit at the public is the man who saved the building from being torn down, Joseph Papp. Joe Papp was a legend in the theatre world. He started Shakespeare in the Park and turned this old library into a home for new and exciting plays. He loved this building with all his heart, and he spent almost every waking hour there until he passed away in 1991. But many of the people who work there today will tell you that Joe never actually left his office. Staff members have reported seeing Joe Papp wandering the hallways late at night. He is usually described as wearing a sharp suit and carrying a clipboard or a stack of scripts, looking like he's in a hurry to get to a rehearsal. One story from a longtime employee mentions seeing a man who looked exactly like Joe walk into an elevator. When the employee followed him in, the elevator was completely empty. There was nowhere for him to go, but he had simply vanished into the air. Because the building was a library for so long, some of the hauntings feel like they belong among the bookshelves. People in the administrative offices, which used to be the stacks where the books were kept, often find that their things have been moved. You might put your car keys on your desk, turn around to grab a coffee, and find them sitting on a bookshelf across the room. It's as if a ghostly librarian is trying to put things back where they belong. The lighting at the public is also famously glitchy in a way that science can't quite explain. Electricians have checked the wires dozens of times, but the lights in the main lobby still like to flicker or dim whenever someone mentions the history of the building. Some actors say they have felt a sudden pressure in the air, like someone is standing very close to them and breathing over their shoulder, especially when they are practicing lines in the quiet corners of the building. One of the spookiest areas is the Newman Theatre, which is one of the performance spaces inside the building. Legend says that an old spirit from the Astor family, the wealthy family who built the library, still keeps watch over the place. Ushers have reported seeing a man in 19th century clothing standing in the back of the theatre, looking very displeased if a modern play is too loud or messy. If he doesn't like the show, the temperature in the room will drop so fast that people in the audience start putting on their coats. Working at the public theatre means respecting the past. The staff knows that they are sharing the building with the people who built it and the man who saved it. It isn't a place that feels evil, but it definitely feels full. Whether it's Joe Papp checking on a new play or a ghostly librarian looking for a lost book, the public is a place where the stories on the stage are only half of the mystery. The Richard Rodgers Theatre is one of the most prestigious stages on Broadway. It has hosted some of the biggest hits in history, and today it is where people go to see the world-famous musical Hamilton. It's a beautiful grand theatre that was built in 1924, and it has a very royal feeling with its gold decorations and red velvet seats. But if you talk to the ushers who work there every night, they'll tell you that sometimes there are more people in the audience than there are tickets sold. The most famous legend at the Richard Rodgers is the phantom audience member. Unlike many ghosts who haunt the stage or the dressing rooms, this spirit just wants to watch the show. For decades, ushers have reported a mysterious figure who sits in the same area of the mezzanine, the middle level of seating. This ghost is usually seen during the middle of a performance. When the ushers do their head count to make sure everyone is in their seat, they see a shadow that looks exactly like a person, but it doesn't have a face. The most chilling part is what happens when the show ends. When the final curtain falls and the house lights come up, the ushers look toward that seat. Every single time, the seat is empty. There is no way a person could have left that quickly without being seen. Even more mysterious is that the seat itself will often stay down, as if someone is still sitting in it, even though nobody is there. It will slowly creak back up into the closed position all by itself. But the ghosts of the Richard Rodgers don't just sit still, they also like to make noise. After the audience has left and the theatre is being cleaned, the phantom crowd begins. Workers have reported hearing the sound of hundreds of people whispering at once, like the sound of a crowd waiting for a play to start. They hear the rustling of programs, the sound of people clearing their throats, and even the faint sound of jewelry clinking. But when they look out into the auditorium, it is pitch black and totally empty. There is also a specific story about a lady in a red hat. A few performers have claimed that while they were taking their final bow, they saw a woman in the front row wearing a giant, old-fashioned red hat with a feather. This stood out because nobody wears hats like that to the theatre anymore. When the actor tried to point her out to a friend after the show, the woman was gone, and none of the people sitting near her remembered seeing anyone in a red hat at all. The basement and the tunnel areas under the stage are also spots where people feel uneasy. There is a legend of a stagehand who used to work at the theatre in the 1940s. He was known for being very organised and getting angry if things were messy. Today, if a modern stagehand leaves a coffee cup or a piece of trash in the wrong spot, they might find it crushed flat or thrown across the room a few minutes later. It seems even in death, the staff at the Richard Rodgers is very serious about their jobs. The Richard Rodgers Theatre is a place of high energy and big emotions. Maybe that's why the ghosts stay there. They want to keep feeling the excitement of a Broadway hit. Whether it's the quiet watcher in the mezzanine or the lady in the red hat, these spirits are the ultimate fans. They've seen thousands of performances, and they don't plan on missing the next one.